Hello, everyone. So today I want to talk about a chapter called Animals, or I don't have to read the whole chapter, by Jean Baudrillard from Simulacra and Simulation. This is my first Baudrillard book to read. I actually picked it up just randomly and started reading it. Anything ever random. There's probably a reason. And then we had to read it in a class that I took this last semester. And I would say I liked it. I almost vowed never to read him again after the chapter Crash because I do not do well with like violent, graphic, bodily kind of literature. I don't know. It just makes me uncomfortable and I don't like being uncomfortable. So intellectually uncomfortable is fine, but I just can't deal with certain levels of, I don't know, disgust maybe. But other than that chapter, and this book is a book where you can kind of read each chapter as a standalone essay. That's what I would say. So the one I wanted to read is called The Animals, Territory and Metamorphoses. I liked this chapter because what he owns is my Oracle card bookmark, because he is harkening back to the pre-modern and kind of being a little nostalgic and evaluating how people in the past whose lives were centered in ritual and the symbolic, how they treated animals and how the treatment of animals, which doesn't mean like the modern person would call how they treated animals humane, but how they treated animals, because the sacred doesn't necessarily discount the violent, like when you think about sacrifice. Hold on. I'm trying to think where I was in that construction of that sentence. Indicated something about the status of human beings. So it's kind of, I feel like people who are interested in animal rights, well, maybe would like this, because he critiques something obvious and he critiques something not so obvious that not everyone would agree with. He critiques the fact that animals are factory farmed and taking them outside of their natural habitat and sorry, basically my throat's been like a little dry. Farming them and breeding them, like not farming, but farming them in a factory, pumping them with hormones, putting them in small spaces, upsetting their circadian rhythm, creates mental illness and neuroses. And he sort of gives the idea, I don't know how explicit he is, but he sort of gives the idea that this is why human beings have increasing pathology and neuroses, because we are animals and we are taken out of our natural habitat to be also bred and used as workers for those who are, I don't know, profiting, etc. This is the idea. Remember the many postmoderns. I don't know, have I met a postmodern who doesn't blame consumerism, commodification, the fetishizing of capitalism, and who isn't suspicious, doesn't find power and profit suspect? I have not. So the way we're using technology is harming us. So he critiques that, and he also critiques animals being experimented on in laboratories, but he also points a finger at the how do you say this? Domestication of animals like pets. So he says that even though some people like love their pets, it's treating them as subservient and kind of in a condescending way. So I think it's really interesting, and I love literature that is about rituals and is about the symbolic and cycles, because I'm a bit of a Luddite. I'm following, what's his name? Something Huberman, the Huberman Lab. My dean told me about it when I told her about my sleeping issues, about the whole circadian rhythm. And so I'm not super great at it, but when I do, it sometimes helps. So basically when the sun goes down, you try not to turn on many lights or any light. Sometimes it's hard to get away from light. Like you have light on your dishwasher if you're running the dishes at night, or, in my old apartment, I actually got little pieces of paper and I taped paper over like the time on the microwave, etc. I even put it over like that little like viewfinder, what's it called? The peephole in the front door, just so I wouldn't have light. But anyway, you're supposed to like embrace the darkness and allow, instead of being so addicted to junk light, and being, allowing that to inflame our bodies, we are supposed to like just reflect and meditate and do whatever you can do in the dark. Fire is okay, like candlelight. And then also I have these little like warm, it's like red light, warm night lights, I guess, that I plug in. I do turn on lights like when I take my night shower. So I'm not like the best at it. And sometimes I'm up until 10 or 11 on tech, but for the most part, I wish that I were strong enough to live in the margins and just be on a farm away from everything and give up my smartphone, etc. So anyway, the idea of Baudrillard and simulacra and simulation is basically that it's revealing the effects. So not just the chapter, but the whole book. It's revealing the effects, the pathological, psychological effects of departing from true false and trying to engage with reality, using our tech to jolt us into a virtual world of entertainment and consumerism and self-exploitation. What this has done, it has changed, basically transformed our ontology and given us different values. Whereas we might have used to value truth and beauty and order, etc. Now it's more as if we want to make sure everything is financially valuable, and we just want to be entertained and numbed, kind of like Brave New World, but as it actually exists in real life. Do I think that we've gone beyond truth and false? I do not actually think that at all. Because every time I go on social media and someone posts something, there's a big debate whether it's true or not. Now, am I missing the point? I don't think so. If the argument is we do not care about what is true or false, maybe in some aspects, but I don't even think, like, a lot of people give the example of reality shows. Oh, we don't care if it's real. We just want to be entertained. And Baudrillard would say about reality shows that reality shows aren't even playing at being real. It's playing at the idea. It's simulating a simulation. It's not simulating truth. It's not simulating reality. It's simulating our ideas of the ideal, of ideal relationships, etc. And we don't care. But I think we care. I think that there's still surprise and shock and discomfort, and there's still a suspicion, like what is true, what isn't true. And I think that if people were told all of this is completely scripted, I think that makes people lose interest. So I don't think that we have evolved or changed so much that our tendencies and our characters and our personalities have changed. I mean, when I read ancient literature and mythology, it's talking about, it's the people, the authors are complaining about the same thing that people would complain about in society and about people today. They're complaining about greed. They're complaining about not taking care of the earth. They're complaining about wasting time. And, so I just, it just, to me, basically an academic who has read a lot of ancient, classic, old literature, it just seems like we haven't evolved at all, so I don't know. So I don't know if I agree or see that. I think that if people are addicted to their tech and their smartphones, they're not forgetting about, and maybe this is just because I'm a millennial and I spent 10, 15 years without smartphones. But I don't think so. I don't think so. So I just disagree with all of the dystopia and the apocalyptic stuff, unless I think the one thing that would change us is steps toward transhumanism. Like if we started implanting chips in our brains, wherever, and it changed our ability to, or the need to cope with suffering, let's say, if it made things easier in a sense. And I guess you could argue that, well, we're so different because things are a lot easier. We can go to the grocery store instead of work with the earth. Maybe to an extent, but that's still so external. If we change something internally, I think we would change ontologically. I think that we've just changed, and I'm pausing because I'm trying to make sure this makes sense. I'll just say it anyway. I think we've changed existentially, and therefore we have existential crises, but I don't think we've changed ontologically. It's just, I don't know. But I will still read and I'll still play along. So I wanted to read the beginning and the end of this, though, because I think it gives you a good idea of this collection of essays. That's what I'm going to call it. So there is what I'm guessing is a very loose translation and paraphrase of some verse in Ecclesiastes. They don't even give us like the chapter or the verse. But the quote at the top of this, the first chapter, which is titled The Procession of Simulacra, is the simulacrum is never what hides the truth. It is truth that hides the fact that there is none. The simulacrum is true. And I guess one might kind of say this is not a new idea, because another way we could say that, I think, is, just going back to Kant, all we see, all that is true, is the human perception. We can only see what we can see, and so that is true. It's not that our perception or our interpretation hides the truth. Actually, maybe. So it's taking step further, I guess, than Kant maybe, but it's that is what is the truth. Would Kant agree with that? No. But that's just what he's trying to say. He says, today abstraction is no longer that of the map, and I'll get to the animal chapter in a second, the double, the mirror, or the concept. Simulation is no longer that of a territory, a referential being, or a substance. It is the generation by models of a real without origin or reality, a hyperreal. So it's not even that everything is fake, assuming that there is the real that exists. But I think Baudrillard is saying that this is a phenomenon that has come about because of certain causes. It wasn't always this way, and it shouldn't be this way. And it's more of a mindset and a neurotic mindset. It's really interesting to look at his pathological language in this. The territory no longer precedes the map, nor does it survive it. It is nevertheless the map that precedes the territory. Okay, the ending of this, I think, shows because if we're asking, well, what does Baudrillard want? What does he think? This is the last paragraph. It's very short. There is no more hope for meaning. And without a doubt, this is a good thing. Meaning is mortal. But that on which it has imposed its ephemeral reign, what it hoped to liquidate in order to impose the reign of the Enlightenment, that is, appearances, they are immortal, invulnerable to the nihilism of meaning or of non-meaning itself. So the appearances are what's immortal. Meaning is mortal. And he says, this is where seduction begins. So when he says, and this is just me, when he says that this is a good thing, I don't believe him. I don't believe he thinks that. Why? It's just a sense I get of reading this entire book, but I'm going to read more Baudrillard. I think the next book that I'm going to get in my June haul is The Agony of Power. Mostly because it reminds me of Byung-Chul Han's The Agony of Eros. And now that I'm reading Baudrillard, I feel as if Han has also read Baudrillard. I mean, of course he has, but I mean, I think he's read and used Baudrillard. Does he ever cite Baudrillard? I don't know. Okay, 18 minutes in, we're starting. The animals, territory, and metamorphosis. What did the torturers of the Inquisition want? And again, in this essay, he's comparing pre-modern to now, saying that now is sick. The admission of evil, the principle of evil. It was necessary to make the accused say that he was not guilty, except by accident, through the incidence of the principle of evil in divine order. Thus, confession restored a reassuring causality, and torture and the extermination of evil through torture were nothing but the triumphal coronation, neither sadistic nor expiatory. I still look up a word. I didn't even mark it either. Just breezed by it. I don't care if I know the word. Where are you, Oxford? Come on, Oxford Dictionary. Okay. I'm not even going to try to guess what it is. Expiratory. That's not it. Sorry. We must know. Okay, it's not in the dictionary. There's expiate. So I think he's trying to make a word. Okay. There's expiate. Make amends or reparation. Okay, that sounds that sounds right. Their sins must be expiated. Okay, so to make amends. So it's a triumphal coronation, neither sadistic nor expiatory. Just 1 second, I just have to write this down. Making amends for wrong doing. Okay, that the form of that word is not in the dictionary, but we figured it out. Of the fact of having produced evil as a cause. Otherwise, the least heresy would have rendered all of divine creation suspect. In the same way, so it's restoring the order, basically. Everything's in place. The divine are divine. The non-divine are not divine. In the same way, when we use and abuse animals in laboratories and rockets with experimental ferocity in the name of science, what confession are we seeking to extort from them from beneath the scalpel and the electrodes? So is there a continuation, or is there something different going on? Precisely the admission of a principle of objectivity of which science is never certain, of which it secretly despairs. Animals must be made to say that they are not animals, that bestiality, savagery, with what these terms imply of unintelligibility, radical strangeness to reason, do not exist. But on the contrary, the most bestial behaviors, the most singular, the most abnormal, are resolved in science, in physiological mechanism, in cerebral connections, etc. Bestiality and its principle of uncertainty must be killed in animals. So it's possible that if we think that we're killing bestiality in animals, that this has been our purpose for ourselves. We want to deny the animal part of us so we can be orderly and civilized and tamed. Experimentation is thus not a means to an end. So we're experimenting in order to make sure things are safe, products are safe for human beings, etc. It is a contemporary challenge and torture. So I guess that's why I was saying that people who are interested in being humane to animals might like this. It does not found in intelligibility. It extorts a confession from science, as previously one extorted a profession of faith. A confession whose apparent distances, illness, madness, bestiality, are nothing but a provisional crack in the transparency of causality. So if there is a cause, so we're looking for the causes to an effect or the effect of a cause, we can control it, we can contain it, we can eradicate it, perhaps. This proof, as before, that of divine reason, must be continually redone and everywhere redone. In this sense, we are all animals, and laboratory animals whom one continually tests in order to extort their reflex behaviors, which are like so many confessions of rationality in the final moment. Everywhere, so confessions of rationality. We confess, we profess, perhaps, that we are rational. Everywhere bestiality must yield to reflex animality, exercising, I don't know why I can't read right now, an order of the indecipherable, of the savage, of which, precisely in their silence, animals have remained the incarnation for us. Animals have thus preceded us on the path of liberal extermination. All the aspects of the modern treatment of animals retrace the vicissitudes just doesn't sound right, of the manipulation of humans, from experimentation to industrial pressuring in breeding. And this is a quote from Science in the Future, July 1973, gathered at a convention in Lyons. I think it's just Lyon. European veterinarians became concerned about diseases and psychological troubles that develop in industrial breeding farms. And this is where he starts talking about how taking animals, non-human animals, out of their natural habitat has brought on mental illness that we would think would only come from human beings, or would only be present in human beings. But his argument, I think, is that mental illness is not natural for us as well. It's the problem of our society. And I think Byung-Chul Han really talks about this and really agrees with this, because he names certain mental illnesses like depression or anxiety, etc., saying that, well, that's a result of our relationship to technology, our relationship to capitalism, etc. Okay. Rabbits develop a morbid anxiety. They become coprophagous and sterile. The rabbit is anxious, maladapted from birth, so it seems. Greater sensitivity to infections, to parasites. The antibodies lose their efficacy. The females become sterile. Spontaneity, if one can say so. Mortality increases. The hysteria of chickens infects the whole group. A psychic collective tension that can reach a critical threshold. All the animals begin to fly and scream in all directions. The crisis over, there is a collapse, general terror. The animals take refuge in the corner, mute and as if paralyzed. It was the first shock, the crisis began. At the first shock, the crisis begins. It can last several weeks. One attempted to give them tranquilizers. So I think he's kind of reading this as if he has taken this, or maybe he has taken this from like news articles. It feels very journalistic. It's kind of like reporting on the dystopia. And I think, again, his point is that we are torturing and doing inhuman things to non-human animals, but less obviously, we have done that we are doing that to ourselves. And that's why we see an increase in mental illness. I mean, the pandemic did exacerbate or create, I think, mental illness. Well, I don't know if I can say it created, but it definitely exacerbated. Cannibalism on the part of pigs. The animals wound themselves. The calves begin to lick everything that surrounds them, sometimes even unto death. It is certainly necessary to establish that bred animals suffer psychically. A zoo psychiatry becomes necessary. A psychic life of frustration represents an obstacle to normal development. It's like, how can we say that mental illness is not natural to non-human animals, but say it is natural to humans? If it's not the effect of civilization. That makes me think of Freud. Darkness, red light, gadgets, tranquilizers, nothing works. In birds, there is a hierarchy of access to food, the pecking order. In these conditions of overpopulation, the last in the order is never able to get food. One thus wished to break the pecking order and democratize access to food through another system of distribution. So if the solution is democracy, placing democracy over these birds so that the last birds can get food, so disrupting the natural cycle, ends up in failure. The destruction of this symbolic order brings along with it total confusion for the birds and a chronic instability. Good example of absurdity. One knows the analogous ravages of good democratic intentions in tribal societies. So we may see something, the civilized person may see something that needs to be corrected, but the correction turns out to be a worse fate. Animals somatize, extraordinary discovery. Cancers, gastric ulcers, myocardial infarction in mice, pigs, chickens. In conclusion, the author says, it certainly seems that the only remedy is space, a bit more space, and a lot of the problems observed would disappear. In any case, the fate of these animals would become less miserable. He is thus satisfied with this conference. The current concern about, it's like we do things to animals, there's problems, and then we have a solution. Oh, this will make it much better, but we're not restoring the animals. We're just keeping them in our factories or our farms or whatever it is, but making that situation better. So it's not dismantling the system, thinking of Audre Lorde. It's just improving and shifting the system so that we can maintain productivity. The current concern about the fate of bred animals is witness once again to the alliance of the morality and the meaning of a well-understood interest. One cannot simply do whatever one wants with nature. The problems having become serious enough to damage the profitability of business, this drop in profitability may lead the breeders to return the animals to more normal living conditions. So we do it if profit is involved. In order to be raised in a healthy manner, it is now necessary to be always concerned with the mental equilibrium of the animal. So it's kind of like we created a new problem, and so we are coming up with solutions, but we wouldn't have needed the solution if we wouldn't have created the problem. And he foresees the time when one will send the animals, like people, to the country to restore their mental equilibrium. So he very, very much wants to make a comparison between the treatment of non-human animals to the self-treatment, in a way, of humans, human beings, human animals. One has never said better how much humanism, normality, quality of life were nothing but the vicissitudes of profitability. I feel like the emphasis on that word should be different. Vicissitudes. The parallel between these animals sick from surplus value and humans sick, there you go, from industrial concentration, from the scientific organization of work. I mean, one thing is a problem that has been created, and what are the sources of civilization to it? Sleeping problems. I'm not the only person with sleeping problems. My sleeping problems may be a little worse than most people, but I mean, it's not just me that companies are making like melatonin gummies for, right? So there must be a demand if there are all of these different contraptions and brain hacks and advice and supplements for insomnia and sleeping issues. Humans sick from industrial concentration from the scientific organization of work and assembly line factories is illuminating. In the latter case as well, the capitalist breeders were led to a revision that was destructive in the mode of exploitation, innovating and reinventing the quality of work, the enrichment of tasks, discovering the human sciences and the psychosociological dimension of the factory. Only the inevitability of death renders the example of the animals more shocking still than that of men on an assembly line. So what are all of the improvements that are being made to a situation that shouldn't even be there in the first place, I think is what Baudrillard is saying. So it's distracting. The solutions are distracting because it doesn't ever dismantle the system. Against the industrial organization of death, animals have no other recourse, no other possible defiance except suicide. All the anomalies described are suicidal. These resistances are a failure of industrial reason, drop in profits. Why did I not highlight that? I like to highlight repetition just so I think that helps people understand. But also one senses that they run counter to the logical reasoning of the specialists. In the logic of reflex behaviors and of the animal machine in rational logic, these anomalies are not qualifiable. One will therefore bestow on animals a psychic life, an irrational and derailed psychic life given over to liberal and humanist therapy without the final objective having ever changed: death. With ingenuity, one thus discovers, like a new and unexplored scientific field, the psychic life of the animals as soon as he is revealed to be maladapted to the death one is preparing for him. So it's not as if we are trying to, with these solutions and improvements to the factory farm of animals or experimentation, et cetera, that's what he's talking about right now, or focusing on right now. It's not that the improvements are necessarily saving the animals. They are prolonging life for a nevertheless intentional or unavoidable end. So I think that the death that is being discussed is not a natural death because the animals are under captivity. It is a death because they will be put to death, or they will die because of what is being applied to them, or they will become like a product for food, etc., for human beings. So I think it's important to understand what kind of death he is talking about here. Okay. With ingenuity, one thus discovers, like a new and unexplored scientific field, the psychic life of the animal as soon as he is revealed to be, I already read that, sorry. In the same way, one rediscovers psychology, sociology, the sexuality of prisoners as soon as it becomes impossible to purely and simply incarcerate them. One discovers that the prisoner needs liberty, sexuality, normalcy to withstand prison. Just as industrial bred animals need a certain quality of life to die within the norm. And nothing about this is contradictory. The worker also needs responsibility, self-management in order to better respond to the imperative of production. I really see why he's talking about this, because if this is in simulacra and simulation, basically, what we're trying to manufacture and manipulate is what we have created for the purposes of profit and power, etc. But by saying that, we're reintroducing the natural, we're upping the quality of life, we're doing things in the work environment to make it feel more like a nature and a normalcy. But by extracting the quality of life, what we do to those elements of the real that we've taken from the real or the original, by appropriating, we change what is the real. So it no longer has the same meaning that it did when there was not this creation, there was not this manipulation. It was just so this is why I say that I think there is a nostalgia for some kind of pastoral, pure nature pre-modern experience. What the postmoderns want us to do with that, I'm not sure, but they like point to it. You know, that's what they are. They are a pointer to the pre-modern. Because they're just skipping over the modern, kind of. Yeah, no, they are. I should put like my finger on the text to know where I stop. Okay, everyone needs a psychic life to adapt. So this is the reason Baudrillard is saying that there is even the study of psychology, because we have to now comment on the effects of what we've decided and what we've done to ourselves. There is no other reason for the arrival of the psychic life, conscious or unconscious. Oh, that's a really good line. See, this is why you need to read things more than once. Then new things pop out. There is no other reason, he is arguing, for the arrival of the psychic life, conscious or unconscious. And it's so if we wouldn't have made certain decisions, you know, industrial decisions, technological decisions, we would have not needed psychology. Not everyone would agree with that. People might agree that we did need psychology in the past. We just didn't know enough, or the conditions weren't there for us to be able to have leisure to think about that. We were too focused on survival, etc. Perhaps. I think I am not super convinced by Baudrillard, because I think of, it's just my highlight doesn't look great. Sorry. Doesn't look like super straight. It's fine. It doesn't need to be perfect. No, it looks worse. Okay. Well, first of all, we can't know the psychology of people in the pre-modern age. We can try to assess based on what texts we have, what their myths were, their stories. We can try to figure out what they wanted. And I know I just said earlier that human beings haven't changed based on the evidence that literature, ancient literature gives me. I need to think about that. I'm just thinking about, for instance, ancient Greece and the psychology, what would have been helpful for basically young men, probably other people as well, but young men, like adolescent boys, knowing how they were treated and what they were used for in intellectual circles, like the Socratic circle. But even that's still the time and the era of, I guess, civilization. I don't know. Okay, and its golden age, which still continues, will have coincided with the impossibility of a rational socialization in every domain. Sorry, I have to get something to drink. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit sleepy as well, just because my own fault. I just stayed up late. What was I doing last night? I was making my book haul video. Okay, so we're just gonna go to the end of this page, because I think we're almost at an hour and we'll have to have a part 2, but I hope you are liking this chapter as much as I do, because I think it's so interesting. Okay, I'll just read that last part again. And its golden age, which still continues, will have coincided with the impossibility of a rational socialization in every domain. Now, what is he talking about there? What golden age? What's golden age, I guess? There is no other reason for the arrival of psychic life. So the golden age of the psychic life, I mean, we do seem to be emphasizing mental health and consciousness, etc. So I don't know. Never would the, maybe I'll write that down, because I don't want to forget it. You know, sometimes you don't understand something, but then you think about it a little bit. I think that's what it's talking about. And it's golden age. Which still continues. Okay. Never would the humanities or psychoanalysis have existed if it had been miraculously possible to reduce man to his rational behaviors. So we tried, is he saying we tried to put humanity in a corner? We tried to make ourselves completely unlike ourselves. And then because we can't, we had to create psychoanalysis and the humanities, which he's talking about, sociology, etc. The whole discovery of the psychological, whose complexity can extend ad infinitum, comes from nothing but the impossibility of exploiting to death the workers. So it's because we were trying to push ourselves, but to push ourselves for what? I mean, during the Enlightenment, I don't know, I would like to think that in the Enlightenment, we were pushing ourselves to be better. Well, even since like Aristotle, we're pushing ourselves to be better in terms of character and virtue and morality. Maybe that's a naive understanding. Of incarcerating to death the detained. Oh, this is getting like so like Foucault like. Okay, I didn't realize that before. Of fattening to death the animals according to the strict law of equivalences. So much caloric energy and time equals so much work power. Such an infraction, such equals such an equivalent punishment. So much food, optimal weight, and industrial death. Oh, that's so interesting. I mean, that's, you know, that is very much Marx right there, right? Thinking of Marx and the plea of the worker, you know, the worker can only work so much, so you have to give them time off and reduce the hours. So it's measurement. This is what Byung-Chul Han talks about. Measurements, calculations, which is, so it's so much caloric energy, such an infraction, so much food. So it's like we're counting. And for some reason, this is like inhuman. Everything is blocked. So psychic life, the mental neurosis, the psychosocial, etc., are born. I think that's so interesting. So it's not a discovery, it's a creation. Thinking about, I mean, that kind of goes along with the whole line of social construction, right? Which I'm just very, this is very much, I'm gonna write Han, I'm gonna write Foucault, all right. Not at all in order to break this delirious equation, but to restore the principle of mutually agreed upon equivalences. The law of equivalences. How much can we do to get how much, to maximize. So it's the solutions for well-being are not to restore well-being for the sake of itself. It's so that there will be a return. And this is why I say in my paper, so my last video, I think I said my book haul was my last video, but it wasn't. The last video is how to write a philosophy paper. That's why I was saying it could be called a bit fear-mongering, because the idea, and even Foucault does this, and Stuart Hall does this, like, but it's not that, see, I mean, there's a line you have to figure it out, because on one hand, we want to critique and we want to question because we do want to find out the truth. But therein lies an assumption that it's us versus them. It's trying to be more aware of what's going on. So does it, so I mean, there have just been articles that have, questioned whether this kind of deconstructionism, this kind of writing, this kind of, not necessarily him pointing out like the injustices toward animals and human beings, but I guess more on the human being side. His questions, do they lead to distrust, which is the source? That actually might be the source of post-truth. I might actually see the other side of post-truth. In a sense, I was saying that I think human beings are always going to care about what's true and want to be told the truth and want to understand. That's just a part of who we are. But if we agree with the postmodernists who feel that, I mean, I think in the modern writings, like Heidegger, he wanted to wake us up because we were just not paying attention. Like Kierkegaard felt that we were just not paying attention. The postmodernists say that we're being manipulated and we need to investigate because the powers that be are malicious. It's just an interesting kind of paranoia and neuroses that, I mean, he's talking about neurosis. So I think paranoia, that would be my question, is the neuroses, is paranoia, just say it like that, is paranoia an effect of postmodernist writing? Which, okay, so I was going to explain the post-truth, the other side of the post-truth. So I do agree, though, that some people can be so disillusioned, or let's just say we can become so disillusioned because we are so suspicious and mistrustful because we have been lied to for various, by a government and like whatever, at times in history. And so that mistrust, just like in, I don't know, a relationship where you're gaslighted, you become hopeless. And there's the nihilism of post-truth, where you no longer care. You no longer care, not just whimsically, you no longer care because it's so frustrating and it's so impossible to find the truth. Okay, so there you go. All right, so I can see some of it. Okay, so we'll stop there. I'm stopping on page 132. There's still a good number of pages left. So I'm definitely going to continue this because I think we haven't really got to like the rituals, etc. So that's exciting. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, and let me know what you read of Baudrillard and any ideas and thoughts that you have. So I will see you on the next one.